Good morning, church. I hope you all are doing great this morning. And today, let's read the scripture together in the book of John, chapter 18, verse 1 to 11, and verse 15 to 18, and 25 to 27. When he had finished praying, Jesus left with his disciples and crossed the Kidron Valley. On the other side, there was a garden, and he and his disciples went into it. Now Judas, who betrayed him, knew the place, because Jesus had often met his disciples. So Judas came to the garden, guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and the Pharisees. They were carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, "Who is it you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "I am he," Jesus said, and Judas the traitor was standing there with them. When Jesus said, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. Again, he asked them, "Who is it you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they said. And Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. If you are looking for me, then let this man go." This happened so that the words he had spoken would be fulfilled. I have not lost one of those you gave me." But Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Jesus commanded Peter, "Put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup of the Father has given me?" Simon Peter and another disciple were following Jesus. Because this disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard. But Peter had to wait outside at the door. The other disciple, who was known to the high priest, came back, spoke to the servant girl on duty there, and brought Peter in. "You aren't one of these men's disciples too, are you?" she asked Peter. He replied, "I am not." It was cold, and the servants and officers stood around a fire they had made to keep warm. Peter also was standing with them, warming himself. Meanwhile, Simon Peter was still standing there warming himself. So they asked him, "You aren't one of his disciples too, are you?" He denied it, saying, "I am not." One of the high priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, challenged him. "Didn't I see you with him in the garden?" Again, Peter denied it, and at that moment, a rooster began to crow. Thank you very much.
Oh, hang on. You came to see. There we go. Excellent. You got me? It was a couple of weeks ago. No, I guess about a month ago, 6 weeks ago. I was at work one day, and I was there. It was a Monday morning at work, and sitting there talking with one of the other guys in the market, and he asked, "How was your weekend? What'd you get up to?" And of course, we finish it early on a Friday, early for everybody else, normal for us, but so it's all Friday afternoon, Saturday, Sunday, and so I just began to tell them about what we did Friday afternoon, and the family was around, and we had wonderful things on Saturday, and all the things we did on Saturday, and I told them what we did Sunday afternoon, and as I left, I suddenly realised, why didn't I tell him about Sunday morning? Why didn't I tell him about being here at church? And I distinctly remember, I can't remember specifically about that Sunday morning, but I distinctly remember thinking it was actually a really good Sunday morning, being connected with my brothers and sisters here at church. Why did I leave that out? Why did I leave that out? And I resolved in that point and that time to not leave that part of the answer out if I got asked again. And I have subsequently been asked again, and I have included that in that question. But why? do I leave it out? It bugged me. And it bugged me a little bit because I was already starting to prepare for this lesson. And as I was reading through John 18, I suddenly saw myself in a story. I suddenly saw myself connected to a story that maybe I wouldn't have connected myself with once before. It's that struggle to choose Jesus. The struggle that we all have, and we all will have at some point, and maybe you don't having it right now, but there will become moments and there will be times in life where we struggle to choose Jesus. Where are those times? What are those times? What can we learn about those times? When are those times likely to sneak up on us? And I think this text has a few answers to speak to some of those questions as to when those things will be and to what it actually means. I want to sit there and talk, first and foremost, Jesus goes with the disciples to the garden where Judas meets them with the troop that are coming to arrest Jesus. Last week, Steve talked about the idea of the promise of family and what that would mean to us, and how family sometimes doesn't measure up. But here, Jesus demonstrates what family means to him. You've come for me? Well, here I am. God, the Father, He has a task for me, but let these ones go. Keep these ones safe. Jesus wants you safe. He's going to have to go through some hard times. He's going to have to go through something he, quite frankly, doesn't want to do. He's going to go places he doesn't want to go, or anybody else to go. His instinct is to keep us safe. That's what family means to him. That's what it means to be part of that family and part of that chosen connectedness that he says is what we're part of. What he calls us to, what we have chosen to be a part of. That which is looked out for, that which is cared for, that which is precious. Jesus calls and says, let them go. Peter, on the other hand, gung-ho as he always has been, and everything, pulls out a sword. Not very good swordsman, because all he manages to do is take a bit of an ear off and everything. I don't know how he managed to take an ear off and not have a shoulder or whatever. But anyway, regardless of that, the ear comes off. We read elsewhere that Jesus actually heals that ear. But here he is. Peter, as much as Jesus' desire is to protect the family, Peter's desire is to sit there and say, I'm just as passionate about this family too. And I'm going to defend this family the only way I know how in this point in time, because life is just going crazy. Part of the problem that we have when we come and read a text like this, for most of us, I'm not going to say that's true for everybody, possibly is for everybody, but definitely for most of us, is we've heard this story before. We know where this goes. We know where this leads. We know what's coming. But Peter and the other disciples are living this in real time. They don't know what happens next. They don't know what the next hour is going to bring. They don't know what dawn is going to bring. They don't know what they will know 24 hours from now. They don't know. They're living it out in real time. And so somehow, some way we have to approach this and read this like we don't know what happens next. To get the full impact of understanding of what it is, the struggle that they have to go through. The struggle and the hardship and the turmoil that's going on within them. We have to suspend that understanding, suspend that knowledge to understand a little bit more of what that's about. So they take Jesus to Caiaphas the high priest. And in verse 15, Simon Peter followed Jesus, as did another disciple. Now that disciple was known to the high priest and went in with Jesus into the courtyard with the high priest. But Peter stood outside. And when the other disciples were also known to the high priest, came out and spoke with her who kept the door and brought Peter in. Why did he go there? You know, what is it that he came to see? They've arrested Jesus, they've taken him away. What is it that Peter thought he was going to see? What is it that he thought he was going to do? What is it that he thought his presence was going to accomplish? You know, we already know that he's impetuous. We already know that he will act before thinking. He will actually speak before engaging his brain. He will do lots of those things. That's just the nature of the man and who he is. But here he is, standing there. You know, and part of me, as I read this, wonders, is he looking to see how this ends out? Is he wondering, my choice comes now? How will this end? Because this impacts me and where I stand and who I am. If this ends badly, you know, I reflect back on Elijah there on Mount Carmel, and he calls Israel together, and it's Elijah versus the prophets of Baal and Asherah, and they're sitting there and they're standing there, and Elijah calls the people, choose. And they can't choose. They don't know who to choose. Who's going to win the day? And so he says, so let's have a contest then. Let's have a contest to see who wins the day. And I say, oh, that's a good idea. That way we don't have to choose. We can just choose the winner at the end. Joshua, he laid down a similar challenge to the people at the end of the book of Joshua. Choose this day whom you will serve. There's a choice that comes. And sometimes we just sit there on the fence and want to see who's going to win the day. Will God come through? Will God come through for me? Will God come through for us? And therefore, I can sit there and proudly say, once he's come through, yes, I knew it all along, and I can be on that winning side. Or if he doesn't, then what? I want to suggest 3 situations, and by no means are these exhaustive. But 3 situations present themselves here in the scripture. So he spoke to her who kept the door and brought Peter in, and the servant girl who kept the door said to Peter, "Are you not one of this man's disciples, are you?" And he said, "I am not." Opportunities come our way. Sometimes to be let in, we're going to be asked to compromise. Sometimes to even get in the door, sometimes to actually be a part of something, sometimes to get where you want to go, where you sit there and say, this is where I want to be, you are going to be called into question. I'm happy to say this is one I think I passed. Between jobs and applying for jobs, I applied for a job at a company here in Tauranga, and as I was sitting there in the interview talking about the job and the role and what it was, they asked me about Sunday mornings, and I said, I'm really not. I go to church Sunday mornings. I'm part of a Christian family, and that's important to me. That's the thing. However, I do recognize that people are sick, and sometimes that there are emergencies, and if that's the case, then I won't leave you short, but don't roster me then. I prefer not. And the guy looked at me, which is completely illegal, by the way, and looked at me and said, yeah, I don't think you're going to fit the ethos of our environment. I don't think you're going to fit into the community that we have here with your values and the way that you are. And I didn't get the job. And he even specified my Christianity was something that was not compatible with the work group that was there. I could have ignored that and got myself a job. I was desperate for a job at the time. But it was there. It's a reality. It is a reality in the world in which we live in. Some people are going to look at that and there will be pressure put to play on us. What do I choose? Where is my choice going to be? I need this. At that time, I needed a job. Will God win and I get a job? At that point, I did not know. I did not know where that was going to be. I didn't know what the end result was. I didn't know what the opportunity was, but I had a choice. Do I trust that God will win the day? Do I trust enough to choose Him? I don't know what choices you've had to face or what situations you've had to find yourself to get yourself in a door somewhere, to find yourself in the place that you think that you need to be. But if you haven't faced that opportunity and if you haven't faced that situation, somewhere along the line, someone is going to call you to make a choice. And you'll have to choose. Peter then, he gets in. He's in. Took denying Jesus, but he's in. It took Satan to say, no, I don't know the man. I don't know who he is. I'm not one of them. No. But he gets in. So there he is. He's in. And when the servants and officers have made fire of coals and stood there, and it was cold, and they warmed themselves, and Peter stood with them and warmed himself. And then on to verse 25. Now when Peter stood and warmed himself, therefore they said to him, are you not also one of his disciples, are you? It's those times where we get comfortable. We're now in. We're with the in crowd. We're with the people that we connected with, and life has become comfortable. They're warming ourselves by the fire with everybody else. We're just like everybody else. We're in. We're connected. And then all of a sudden, that connectedness gets brought into question. That connectedness comes and says, are you really? Are you really part of this group that stands here and warms ourselves by the fire? Are you really part of this group that says just this is how comfortable we are? And God calls us to a place that's incredibly uncomfortable. If I say, yes, I do know the man, what's that going to do to my comfort in the situation? What's that going to do? Maybe that's a family situation that you have. Maybe it's in your family and you're sitting there saying, I'm comfortable in my family, and we're saying, just don't rock the boat. We have a way of dealing with things, and we have our way that's just comfortable, and we live our life this way, and nobody rocks the boat, and everybody gets on, and that's just fine. Maybe that happens within our family. That can happen in a workplace. That can happen right here at church. Just don't rock the boat. We're all getting along fine. You really believe that, do you, David? Yeah. We stand up for who we are, we stand up for our freedoms, but on the other hand, by the same token as well, we don't necessarily, sometimes rocking the boat is actually a bad thing. But still, amongst our Christian fellowship, amongst our Christian things, sometimes we fail to stand up and say, this is actually what's right. And you know what? Peter himself, even though he goes through this situation and learns his lesson about being in a comfortable situation, still falls into that later on in life, because Paul calls him out in Galatians. In the Galatian letter, when he's in Antioch, Paul calls him out for just sitting there wanting to be comfortable by hanging out with only the Jewish Christians. Peter, who said, hey, this is, God has accepted the Gentiles just like He's accepted us, and we should be inclusive of everybody, wanted to be where it was comfortable for him. later on. He chose that. Paul called him out for it. So yeah, even amongst fellow Christians, we can find that self in that situation of just seeking what is comfortable rather than choosing Jesus, rather than choosing to stand up and say, this is who Jesus is. Yeah, I'm connected with him. Yeah, he's got things to say. There's a third situation that occurs, and I can't believe I'd never actually read this before. I don't know how I'd managed to skip this. Verse 26, one of the servants of the high priest, a relative of him whose ear Peter had cut off, said, did I not see you in the garden with him? A relative. I know your past. I know your dirty secrets. I know your hypocritical behavior. You really one of them? You really stand up for Jesus? I know what you've done in the past, and I know how you behave. I saw you. I saw you, and you stand guilty. You know him? Are you one of his people? And how easy it is for us to sit there and say, well, I feel hypocritical. I feel like I'm unworthy. I feel like I don't belong. I feel like I have failed in so many ways, and it's just as easy to sit there and say, well, obviously not, and turn away. There are people that will seek to tear us down. Satan will seek anything he can to tear us down and tear apart this family that Jesus so desperately wants for us to be. This relationship that he so desperately wants us to have. And Satan will use every trick in the book to try and get us to deny Jesus, to deny him, to choose, to make it incredibly difficult, to struggle to choose Jesus. And he will find ways in which doing that, and that includes comfort, that includes direct confrontation, that includes our past, that includes letting us in the door, the opportunities. He will find those, and like I said at the beginning, no way limiting ourselves to these three opportunities, but these three present themselves right here. We can deny by words, by saying things. We can deny in our actions by doing things. We can deny by deliberate omission, like I did, by not mentioning. I didn't lie, I just failed to mention. I can deny because, quite frankly, all of these things, the things they have all in common, every single denial that Peter makes is all about his own personal comfort in that situation. The uncertainty of the future, and I don't know what it's going to be, but I need to make sure that I am comfortable in the situation, that I am all right. And I need to do all that I can to make sure that I am protected. Meanwhile, Jesus is sitting there saying, he is putting himself in his Father's hands to make sure everything for you and me will be all right. And it's going to be incredibly uncomfortable for him. It's going to be the most stressful 24 hours of his entire life. It is the hardest thing that he is ever going to have to do, to put himself, and By make no bones about it, put his faith in his Father, that his Father is going to sort this out. Like he's done for the rest of his life, but this is his life he's putting on the line in faith with his Father. To say, everything will be all right. No control whatsoever, but faith in the Father that everything will be all right. There is always, always, always a struggle to choose. But there's always, always, always good news too. You know, back in Luke, when Luke goes through and talks about this the same situation, relays the same story, Jesus predicts Simon Peter's denial of him. And he says this in Luke 22:31. The Lord said, Simon, Simon, indeed, Satan has asked for you that he may sift you as wheat, but I have prayed for you. He knows that we are going to go through those struggles. He knows that there is going to be hard times. He knows of the stresses that there are to choose. He knows of those struggles of what it is to stand up for him. He recognizes that it's going to be hard for us. He recognized it's hard for Peter. He recognized it'll be hard for you. It'll be hard for me. You have to remember, Peter goes through this. He's been walking with Jesus for 3 years. He's connected to the guy. I think actually that's why he was there. He loved. He cared. He turned up. I have prayed for you that your faith should not fail. Is it a failure of our faith? Have we suddenly given up completely on God? Or have we just buckled under the pressure of the situation? That your faith should not fail, and when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren. Jesus sees a possibility of a future. He says there is a future for you, even when that situation occurs, even when you've denied me 3 times, even when you've sat there and caved in all of those times, there is still a future for you and me together. And not only is there a future for Peter and Jesus to be together, but there is a future for Peter and his brothers, the disciples, and the church to be together. Even after the failure, Jesus says there's still hope. That's not the end. It's not the end. It doesn't have to be the end. Luke will say after Peter denied him, it says in Luke 22, verse 60, it says, but Peter said, man, I don't know what you are saying. And immediately while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed, and the Lord turned and looked at Peter. And Peter remembered the word of the Lord and how he had said to him, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And Peter went out and wept bitterly. Failed. I love this guy so much, and I have failed him. I'm there because I love him. I'm there because I'm connected, and I have failed him. Jesus knew what he was going to do. He accepted him regardless. There's acceptance for each one of us, even in the midst of our failure, there is still acceptance. Will we choose to grab hold of that acceptance? Will we choose to value that acceptance? Will we choose to allow that acceptance to make a difference to our life? Because it did to Peter. Peter chose it. Peter chose it because, again, Peter followed Jesus to where he was going to be trial and everything, and then as soon as he hears that the tomb is empty, what does he do? He's running to the tomb. Yeah, okay, he's a bit slow, because the other disciple gets there first, but he's still running there. And it doesn't matter that the other disciple's standing in the entranceway to the empty tomb. He just barges his way through and goes in there. Why? Because he wants to be where Jesus is. He wants to choose Jesus. We have to want to choose Jesus. And it's a choice that we're going to have to make, because Peter wasn't the only one who had that choice to make that night. Jesus knew what Peter was going to do, and he loved him. Peter knew what Judas was going to do. What you do, go and do quickly, he told him. And then as Jesus meets him in the garden, and Judas comes to kiss him, Jesus asks him, calls him friend. There's no criticism, there's no accusation, there's no condemnation in his voice. He's looking at him in the eye, just as he turned and looked at Peter and saw Peter in his moment of weakness and his moment of failure. Jesus is looking at Judas in his moment of failure too and calling him friend. But Judas didn't choose Jesus in the end. Peter did. Peter did. Jesus is sitting there saying, I recognize you're going to fail. I recognize you're going to falter. I recognize life is going to be hard and present many challenges to you. And sometimes you'll pass and sometimes you'll fail and reject me and not choose me. But I still choose you. Do you still want to choose me? Do you still want to choose me? Can you live with yourself with those things? Because I can live with you, he's saying. I'm there for you. My grace is sufficient to cover that. The struggle is real. It's genuine. It's who we are. It's how we live our lives. We encourage one another. We support one another. We're there for one another. We need to speak into each other's lives and the words of truth and the words of Jesus into one another's lives and say, we can do this. Together, with support, we can do this. And if you failed, share the failures and, in the words of Jesus, strengthen your brothers and sisters with those because of the strength that he has given you. Let's be strengthened together. Choice is yours. Choice is mine. Choice is ours. It always has been. Jesus just stands there with open arms and says, you want to come?